Welcome back to the Quarterly Call. All content is for informational purposes and is not investment advice. Please consult with an investment professional.
Sounds good.
We're going to be talking about cybersecurity today.
Yeah.
And, kind of where it's going, where it's headed.
Yeah.
We've got some interesting thoughts from Nikesh Arora, the CEO of Palo Alto Networks. This was from a recent UBS conference he was at.
Okay.
He had some pretty strong opinions about AI and how that's going to kind of revolutionize the whole industry.
It's really interesting to see how much cybersecurity spending is actually going towards services, not the products themselves.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
So kind of break that down for me.
What that suggests is that people are buying a bunch of products and just hoping for the best, which, that's not enough anymore. You need somebody to manage all of this complexity, and that's why people are spending a lot more money on services.
Oh, that makes sense. Cybersecurity is getting more and more complicated.
Right.
And especially with, cloud computing and the explosion of data.
Absolutely.
But what surprised me was how optimistic Aurora was about spending in technology overall.
Yeah.
We're kind of in an economic downturn.
Yeah. He was really bucking the trend there.
Yeah.
But he's got some interesting reasons for his optimism.
Okay, so what are those?
He's got two main factors at play. The first one is AI funding is still going strong.
Mm-hmm.
So that suggests that people are, taking this really seriously. Businesses don't want to be left behind. And second, it sounded like he was hinting that the new administration might be considering some regulatory changes.
Oh, is this the Elon Musk having the ear of the new president?
Yeah, there has been some intriguing developments that suggest a shift in focus towards technology.
Oh, interesting.
Whether that actually translates into policy changes, who knows?
Right.
But, going back to cybersecurity, Aurora was talking about this concept of cybersecurity debt, which I thought was pretty insightful.
Oh, okay. What's that?
He was basically arguing that companies have this huge debt because they haven't been keeping up with all the vulnerabilities and security risks. It's like ignoring this little crack in your foundation.
Uh-huh.
Eventually, it becomes a huge problem.
So you're saying it's kind of the cost of all the attacks and breaches that they haven't really dealt with?
Yeah, that's right. And the point is that this debt hasn't been paid, so we're going to keep seeing investment in this area going up.
Right. That makes sense. And not to mention, cyber threats are always evolving.
Yeah.
And with AI getting smarter and smarter all the time, Aurora seemed really, fascinated by the potential of AI, both, how attackers can use it and how defenders can use it.
Yeah, he really thinks that the real turning point will be when AI can truly reason and not just process information.
Uh-huh.
Imagine if AI is making all the decisions about security in real time without us doing anything.
Wow, that's kind of scary, honestly.
Yeah.
It's like we're not just protecting our systems from hackers anymore. We're protecting AI from itself.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And that brings us to one of his other key arguments, platformization.
Okay.
He says that there are companies drowning in security solutions, like 20 to 70 different vendors they're using.
70? That's unbelievable. Like, how do you even keep track of all of that?
I know, right? And that's exactly his point, that it's completely unmanageable.
Right.
He was comparing it to the success of these SaaS companies like Salesforce and Workday. They were able to integrate multiple solutions into one platform, and that made it a lot easier to manage.
So is he saying that one cybersecurity company could handle it all? Like, is that even realistic?
Yeah, he's definitely making a case for consolidation, but, realistically, he was pointing out that Palo Alto Networks, they can already integrate 60 to 70% of a customer's security needs.
Wow.
Into their platform.
Okay.
And he sees that as like a major trend going forward.
That would be a huge shift in the industry.
Yeah.
It sounds like they're positioning themselves to be the leader in this platformization thing.
They definitely are. They've been making strategic acquisitions. They're investing a ton in AI to power this whole platform. But what I thought was really interesting was that he sees this going way beyond simplifying things for customers.
Oh, really? What's he thinking?
He actually thinks platformization is going to make security more effective because you're not just relying on all these different tools. You've got this unified platform. It can see everything and respond in a much smarter way.
That makes a lot of sense. But what happens to all the other companies, like the smaller companies?
That's a great question.
Are they just going to get, swallowed up by the big guys?
I mean, he seems to think there will always be room for more specialized solutions.
Okay.
But they'll have to, play nice with the bigger platforms.
Oh, so it's more about working together than, one company winning.
Exactly. It's about finding the right combination of technologies that work for each customer's needs.
Gotcha, gotcha. That makes sense. Um, you know, Speaking of shaking up the industry, Aurora also had some pretty bold predictions about the future of SIEM,
Yeah.
which stands for Security Information and Event Management, right?
Yes.
He doesn't just think there are going to be changes, like he thinks there's going to be complete disruption in the next 7 years. He even threw out a number like $20 to $40 billion as a potential market.
Yeah, huge. And they just acquired IBM's QRadar sign business.
Oh, wow.
So, he's putting his money where his mouth is.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And they've already hit $1 billion in annual recurring revenue.
That's right.
So, I mean, they're definitely a player. But it's not just about like size and acquisitions. He actually thinks they have this fundamental advantage because of their platform.
Mm-hmm.
So how does their platform help them win in this SIEM market?
Well, the traditional SIEM solutions are these standalone products that are difficult to integrate,
Right.
Palo Alto Networks, they can integrate SIEM right into their platform, so they've got this more holistic view of what's going on.
So they're basically saying, why would you buy a separate SIEM when we can just build it into our platform?
Exactly, exactly. And a lot of companies are buying into that, especially if they're already using Palo Alto Networks.
Yeah, of course. It just makes sense.
You've got all your security data in one place. It makes it so much easier to analyze.
Right, right. So what happens to the companies that are using SIEM solutions from someone else?
Yeah.
Are they going to have to switch?
He doesn't seem to think so.
Okay.
He thinks there's always going to be room for these different solutions, but the market's going to consolidate around a few key players that can really deliver this integrated platform approach.
So it's not about getting rid of the competition. It's about, raising the bar.
Exactly. Which is good for everybody because customers end up getting these more powerful solutions.
Right, right. Makes sense. But he didn't stop there. He also dropped another kind of bombshell. He said that he thinks we're on the edge of a massive shift in how we use technology at work.
Mm-hmm.
Where the browser basically becomes the main interface for almost everything we do.
Yeah. I mean, you're probably doing like 90% of your work through the browser these days, right?
I think so.
Email, documents.
Yeah, I mean, it's all in there.
Yeah.
Pretty much everything I do.
Yeah, and that's exactly what he's saying. As we move towards a more cloud-centric, AI-driven world, the browser becomes even more important, and we need to make sure it's secure.
Especially with all this talk about data visibility and control these days.
Yeah, yeah.
Which is where their recent acquisition of Talon comes into play, right?
Right.
The enterprise browser security company.
That's right. He's making a pretty big bet that securing the browser is going to be super important,
Yeah.
especially as companies move sensitive stuff to the cloud.
So they're saying, if the browser is the center of everything, we need to secure that to secure everything.
Exactly.
A smart strategy.
It is, and it fits nicely into their whole platform approach.
Right, right. So it's not just focusing on one thing. It's looking at the whole picture, like the whole landscape.
Exactly.
It's almost like they're trying to build the operating system for cybersecurity.
It's a great analogy.
Yeah. So before we move on to some of the other big things Aurora talked about, there's one more point I want to touch on. He had some pretty strong opinions about how we should, how investors should evaluate these software companies, especially cybersecurity companies.
Yeah, he had some pretty strong words about how traditional metrics like billings can be very misleading.
He's not wrong about that.
Yeah.
I mean, billings can go up and down based on all sorts of things,
Right. Contracts, payment schedules.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So they don't always show you how healthy the business really is.
That's right. He was arguing that investors should be looking at metrics that give them a better picture of the company's revenue in the future. Things like remaining performance obligations.
Okay.
And deferred revenue.
So what do those tell us? What do those mean?
So RPO, that's the total value of all the contracts that haven't been recognized as revenue yet.
Okay.
Deferred revenue, that's the payments that they've received but they haven't actually earned yet.
Okay, so it's basically like the backlog of business they have.
Exactly, and that's what investors should really be paying attention to.
Okay. But he didn't just stop there. He also emphasized free cash flow, right?
He did. He thinks that's the most important metric, as their business model evolves.
That makes sense. Free cash flow is the lifeblood of any business.
Absolutely. And he thinks their platform is more efficient, more scalable, than the traditional way of doing things.
So they're saying, hey, we're not just building a better cybersecurity platform, we're also building a more profitable business model.
That's exactly it.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. But there's one more big idea from Aurora's interview that I want to dig into. He had some interesting thoughts about this idea that using a bunch of different security vendors is better because of diversification.
Right.
He basically called it a myth.
I know, right? I mean, diversification has always been like the cornerstone of security, right?
Yeah.
But when you think about it, it makes sense what he's saying.
Okay, yeah, break that down for me.
He thinks managing all these different security products, it actually creates more problems than it solves.
Oh, yeah, I can see how that would be a nightmare, like trying to keep track of all the updates and all the different systems.
Exactly. It's super complex, super time-consuming, and it often leads to these gaps in coverage
Right.
that attackers can exploit.
So what's the solution? If diversification isn't the answer, then
Right.
what is? How do you get true security?
Well, his answer, of course, is platformization.
Right.
He thinks we should be consolidating all of these security functions into these integrated solutions.
Mhm.
He thinks that's the only way to get real security.
So are we headed towards a world where every company just uses one platform? Like, is that even possible?
It's a really interesting thought, and he seems to think it's inevitable. He says the threats are just getting too complex.
Right.
And these traditional piecemeal approaches, they just can't keep up.
So it's not just about convenience or cost savings or anything like that. It's really about survival in the face of, increasingly sophisticated cyber attack.
Exactly.
Okay, so those are some great questions. We're definitely going to explore them in more depth in our next conversation.
Sounds good.
But for now, I think we need to take a quick break.
Okay.
We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Quarterly Call. Before the break, we were talking about Aurora's view on this whole diversification myth. And, it is a bold statement to say that using all these different security vendors actually makes you more vulnerable.
It is, but when you think about it, it makes sense. Trying to manage all those systems, it really is a nightmare.
Yeah, it's like herding cats, right? You can't get them to go in the same direction.
Exactly. And those gaps, those are what attackers are looking for.
Right. So it's not just about the tools you have, it's about how well they work together.
Right.
And Aurora seems to think that the only way to really achieve that is through platformization.
Yeah, he's arguing for a more holistic approach.
Right.
A platform-based model.
Which is what Palo Alto is trying to build, right?
Absolutely. They want to be the one-stop shop for cybersecurity. One platform that can handle everything.
Right, from network security to endpoint protection to cloud security.
Everything. The whole 9 yards.
And they're not just talking about it, they're putting their money where their mouth is. We talked about that QRadar acquisition.
Right.
Which gives them a real strong position in the SIEM market.
Yeah, that helped them to cross $1 billion in annual recurring revenue for their SIEM products.
Wow.
That's a pretty amazing growth.
That is huge. But it's not just acquisitions. They're investing in AI, developing new technologies to make their platform even more effective.
Absolutely. And what's interesting is that Aurora doesn't think this is going to lead to like a winner-take-all situation.
Okay.
He still thinks there's a role for the more specialized companies.
Yeah.
It's about creating an ecosystem where all these solutions can work together, like a symphony orchestra.
Oh, I like that.
You have all these different instruments, but they all play together to create, one beautiful piece of music.
I like that. That's a good analogy. And it really highlights the importance of interoperability, right?
Yeah.
And open standards.
Absolutely.
If we want these solutions to really work together, they have to be able to talk to each other.
Exactly. And, Aurora touched on that too. He's really emphasizing open standards, collaboration,
Right.
He wants the industry to move in that direction.
So it's not just about building a better platform, it's about building a better ecosystem.
Exactly. And I think that's a really important point as we think about the future. It's not just about the technology.
Right.
It's about the people, the processes, everything.
Right. So we've talked about the tech, we've talked about the industry, but what about the people using these solutions? Like, how does all of this affect, the everyday users?
That's a great question. And, one of the things Aurora said is that security has to be user-friendly.
Right.
If it's too complex, people are just going to find ways to work around it.
Yeah, it defeats the whole purpose, right?
Exactly. It's like having, this really fancy security system, but if you can't figure out how to use it, you're just going to leave the door unlocked.
Right, exactly. So, how do you balance that then? Like, how do you get the security you need without making it, too difficult for people to actually use?
That's the million-dollar question. I think education is going to be a really important piece of that puzzle.
Yeah.
Helping people understand the risks, helping them understand how to protect themselves.
Right. So it's not just about the tech. It's about creating a security-conscious culture.
Absolutely. And that has to start from the top. You know, Leaders need to set the tone. They need to make it clear that this is everyone's responsibility. Right. And it goes beyond just, strong passwords and clicking on the right links. It's about thinking about security in every aspect of our digital lives.
Right, right. From, the websites you visit to the apps you download.
Everything.
To the devices you use.
Exactly. We need to be, we need to be careful. We need to be proactive.
Right. And it's not just about protecting ourselves. It's about protecting our organizations, our families.
Our communities.
Yeah. It's a shared responsibility. We all have to play our part in creating a safer digital world.
Couldn't have had it better myself. So I think that's a good place to maybe switch gears for a second.
Okay.
We've talked a lot about the future of cybersecurity. AI, platformization, all of that. But Aurora also had some interesting things to say about how investors should be evaluating these software companies.
Right.
Especially in the cybersecurity space.
Right. He wasn't afraid to challenge some of the traditional thinking around, how we measure success.
He really wasn't. He was talking about billings, for example.
Right, which he thinks can be misleading.
Very misleading, especially for these SaaS businesses.
Right, because they can go up and down based on all sorts of factors.
Exactly. Contracts, payment terms, all that stuff. It doesn't always tell you the whole story.
Right, right. And he was saying that investors should be looking at metrics that give you a better sense of future revenue. Things like remaining performance obligations.
Exactly.
And deferred revenue.
Exactly.
So break those down for us. What do those actually mean? How do those give us a clearer picture?
Sure. So RPO, that's the total value of all the contracts that haven't been recognized as revenue yet. And deferred revenue, that's all the money they've received but haven't earned yet.
Right. So it's kind of like a backlog of business.
Exactly. Exactly. It tells you what's coming down the pipeline.
Okay. So that's what investors should be looking at.
Yeah. I mean, that's a much better indicator of a company's long-term health.
Gotcha. And he didn't stop there. He also emphasized free cash flow, right?
He did. He's a big believer in free cash flow.
Okay.
He thinks it's a really important metric, especially as their business model evolves.
Makes sense. I mean, free cash flow is important for any business, really.
Absolutely. It's the lifeblood.
And he thinks Palo Alto is in a great position to maintain a healthy cash flow margin as they grow.
Okay. So they're basically saying, hey, we're not just building a better platform, we're building a more profitable business model.
Exactly. They want to have their cake and eat it too. Okay. So we've talked a lot about these bigger trends, but Aurora also had some interesting things to say about this idea that the browser is becoming like the main interface for everything we do at work.
Oh, yeah. He's really excited about that.
Yeah.
He sees that as the next frontier in security.
Okay. I mean, it makes sense when you think about it, right?
Yeah.
We're already doing so much in the browser.
Pretty much everything.
Yeah. Emails, documents, even video calls these days.
Yeah. And as more companies move to the cloud, the browser becomes even more important.
Right, right. Because everything is happening in the cloud. And the browser is how we access it.
Exactly.
Which brings us back to platformization.
Full circle.
If everything's in the cloud and we're accessing it through the browser, we need a platform that can protect us across all those different environments.
Absolutely. We need a platform that can see the whole picture.
Right, right.
And respond to threats, in a timely and effective manner.
Right, right. Without getting in the way.
Exactly.
So it's a big challenge.
Yeah.
But it's also, a huge opportunity for companies like Palo Alto Networks.
Absolutely. It's going to be fascinating to see how this all plays out.
Okay, so those are all some really interesting points. We've covered a lot of ground here.
We have. It's been a good conversation.
And we've only scratched the surface of what Aurora had to say.
There's a lot more to unpack.
Yeah. We'll definitely be revisiting some of these topics in future episodes.
Sounds good.
But for now, I think we need to take another quick break.
Okay.
We'll be right back with more from the Quarterly Call. Welcome back to the Quarterly Call. We've been talking about the future of cybersecurity and, all the insights that Aurora shared at that UBS conference.
Yeah, it's been a really interesting conversation.
It has. And I think, one of the big takeaways is this emphasis on the human element of security.
Absolutely.
He talked about how important it is to make security solutions more user-friendly, more intuitive, especially as we move towards this, browser-centric world.
Right. I mean, we can have the best technology in the world, but if people can't use it, it's not going to do any good.
Exactly.
Mm.
Exactly. So how do we do that? How do we balance security and usability,
Mm.
especially in, today's complex world?
That's the million-dollar question. I think education is a really important piece of the puzzle.
Uh-huh.
We need to help people understand the risks, make them aware of the things they can do to protect themselves.
Right. So it's not just about the tech. It's about creating a culture of security awareness.
Exactly, exactly. And that has to start from the top. Leaders need to make it clear that security is everybody's responsibility.
Right. And that goes beyond just, strong passwords and being careful about what you click on.
Oh, absolutely.
It's really about thinking about security in everything you do online.
Yeah, the websites you visit, the apps you download, the devices you use.
Yeah, everything. We have to be vigilant. Yeah. We have to take proactive steps to mitigate those risks. And it's not just about protecting yourself, it's about protecting your organization.
Your family, your community.
Right, right. It's shared responsibility. We all have to play our part.
I couldn't agree more. I think that's a great note to end on.
Yeah, I think so too. We've covered a lot of ground today, from the rise of AI to the need for platformization to the importance of user education, a security-conscious culture. We've only scratched the surface of Aurora's insights.
There's a lot more to unpack there.
There is. And we'll definitely be revisiting some of these topics in future episodes. But for now, I think we need to wrap things up.
Yeah, it's been a great discussion. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for tuning into the Quarterly Call. For more episodes, please remember to rate and follow our show. Until next time, stay curious and stay informed.